She had learned to keep her eyes down, not because she was weak, not because she had forgotten who she was, but because the world had taught her, slowly, over 10 years of teaching, that a woman who kept her eyes down survived longer, got paid more often, got sent home less. So when the agency van dropped her at the iron gates of the Whitmore estate on a Tuesday morning in November, the sky the color of old dishwater, her canvas bag over one shoulder, her feet already aching inside her second-hand flats, she kept her eyes down. She noted the cobblestone driveway without looking up at it. She noted the fountain in the center without letting herself feel anything about it. She noted the width of the front door, the height of the porch columns, the kind of house that people built when they wanted the world to know that they had one. She rang the service bell. She waited. Her name was Clara Mendez. She was 34 years old. She had a son named Mateo, who was 9, who slept on a fold-out cot in the corner of a room they rented from a woman named Mrs. Park in Elmhurst, who charged $600 a month and left notes on the refrigerator about which shelf was theirs. Mateo had asthma. The inhaler cost $87 without insurance. Clara had insurance through the agency, but it had a $300 deductible, and November was the month the deductible reset, and she had $42 in her checking account and a jar of coins on the windowsill she had not counted in 3 weeks because she was afraid of what the number would be. She was also 5 months pregnant. The agency didn't know that yet. She had worn the same oversized uniform shirt for 3 placements now, a dark gray cotton that the agency provided for new staff, and it was loose enough and she was carrying small enough that no one had noticed. Or if they had noticed, they had said nothing, which was sometimes worse because it meant they were waiting to see how useful she would be before they decided whether to care. The door opened. A woman in her 50s with silver hair, pulled back and reading glasses pushed up on her head, looked at Clara the way people looked at the weather. Assessing. Not unkind, but not warm either. "You're from Prestige Domestic?" "Yes, ma'am." "Clara Mendez. I have my documents. Come in. Mrs. Hartley will go through everything with you. Wipe your shoes." Clara wiped her shoes on a mat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She stepped inside. The entrance hall was marble. The ceiling was high enough that her breath felt small inside it. There was a painting on the wall that was not decorative. It was the kind of painting that was art, the kind that meant something to someone who understood things Clara did not understand, and the frame alone probably paid for 3 months of Mateo's inhaler. She kept her eyes down. Mrs. Hartley was the housekeeper. 52, built like a woman who had been standing on tile floors for 3 decades and had made peace with the ache of it. She walked Clara through the house with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times and expected to do it many times more. The house had 7 bedrooms. Clara would be responsible for 3 of them: the common bathrooms, the main hallway, the mudroom, and the kitchen after meals. There was another maid, a woman named Doris, who handled the west wing. There was a groundskeeper named Hector who handled outside. There was a chef who came 3 days a week and a laundry service that came on Thursdays. The household operates on a strict schedule, Mrs. Hartley said. Mr. Whitmore is particular about routine. He doesn't like surprises. I understand, Clara said. He works from home on Wednesdays. You'll need to be quiet on the 2nd floor between 9 and 2. Of course. He has guests occasionally. When there are guests, you are invisible. You understand what I mean by that? Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Hartley stopped walking and looked at her properly for the first time. Something shifted in her expression. Not softness, exactly, but a recalibration. She was looking at Clara's face the way people sometimes looked at something they almost recognized. You look tired, she said. I'm fine, Clara said. I work hard. I don't cause trouble. I just need the placement to hold through the end of January, if possible. I have some things I'm sorting out. Mrs. Hartley looked at her for a moment longer. Then she nodded once and kept walking. The salary is $22 an hour. The agency takes their percentage. You'll receive your time sheet on Friday. $22 an hour. 40 hours a week. Minus the agency cut, minus taxes, minus the bus fare to get here from Elmhurst. She had already done the math on the agency van ride over. It was enough. If she was careful. If Mateo didn't need anything unexpected. If the baby came on time and not before. If. Underscore, 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 underscore. If this story is already finding its way into your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to Mama Told Me. And drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. Mama always said kindness travels farther than you think. Underscore, 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 underscore. She had been at the Whitmore estate for 4 days before she saw him. 4 days of learning where things lived. Which cabinet held the good china and which held the everyday dishes, and that those two things were never to be confused. Which towels were for the guest bathrooms and which were for the family, and that the family ones had small embroidered W's on the corner that you noticed once and never forgot. Which surfaces liked lemon and which were damaged by it. The particular way Mr. Whitmore apparently liked the books on his study shelf. Not alphabetically, not by size, but in some personal logic she had not yet decoded. She had not yet met Mr. Whitmore. He was always either in his study or out. She knew he existed the way you know the weather in a country you've never visited, through evidence of it, through the shape it left on everything around it. On the 5th morning, she was on her knees in the upstairs hallway, running a cloth along the baseboard when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Quick, confident footsteps. The footsteps of someone who had never had reason to move quietly through a space that belonged to them. She sat back on her heels and started to stand. The footsteps reached the top of the landing. She looked up, and the cloth fell out of her hand. She did not make a sound. That was the first and most important thing. She did not make a sound because 10 years of surviving had made her very good at not making sounds at moments when making a sound would cost her something. He hadn't seen her yet. He was looking at his phone, scrolling, already moving toward his study door. Dark hair shot through at the temples with early gray. The jaw she had once known well enough to draw from memory. The particular set of his shoulders, the particular length of his stride, the particular way he held his phone too close to his face when he was reading something that annoyed him. Daniel Whitmore, the man who had left her. Not just left her when she was 24 and 3 months pregnant and had not yet told anyone except him. Because she had wanted to tell him first, because she had thought, she had believed, with every part of herself, that he would be glad. He had not been glad. He had been very quiet for a very long time. And then he had said, with the measured calm of someone reading a statement they had prepared in advance, that he needed to think. That this was complicated. That there were things about his life she didn't understand. That his family had expectations. That he was sorry. That he was sorry. She had not seen him again after that night. He had left the apartment they shared. He had stopped returning her calls. 3 weeks later, a man in a suit had knocked on her door and left an envelope containing $10,000 in a cashier's check and a single page that said, in legal language she had to read 3 times to understand, that by accepting this sum she agreed that she would make no further contact with Daniel Whitmore or any member of his family, and that she would make no legal claims regarding any matter pertaining to their relationship. She had held that piece of paper for a very long time. Then she had put it in the kitchen drawer and not touched it again because she had not signed it, had never signed it, and she needed to not think about it in order to function, and functioning was what she had to do because she was going to have a baby, and she was alone, and the only person who had ever made her feel like she was not alone had just paid a lawyer to make her disappear. She had not signed it. She had also not cashed the check. It was still in the kitchen drawer 7 apartments ago, which meant it was lost somewhere in the years between then and now, because you don't carry a $10,000 check across 10 years of running from something. You lose it eventually, the same way you lose everything else that belongs to a life you're trying to stop living. Mateo was 9 years old. He had his father's jaw. Clara picked up the cloth from the floor. She stood slowly, quietly, and took 2 steps back toward the bathroom doorway, where she could be around a corner, where she could breathe without him hearing her breathe. He reached his study door, pushed it open, walked through, pulled it closed behind him. She stood in the bathroom doorway and pressed her back against the wall, and put her hand over her mouth and breathed. 1, 2, 3. The thing about 10 years of surviving is that it teaches you to do one thing at a time. You do not think about the whole of the thing. You think about the next step. Just the next step. The next step was finishing the baseboard. So she did that. Underscore that evening, in the dim light of the bus back to Elmhurst, her hands folded in her lap over the small, firm swell of her belly, she thought about what she was going to do. She could leave. She could call the agency in the morning and say the placement wasn't a good fit. They would find her something else. It might take a week. It might take 2. She had $42 and a jar of coins she hadn't counted. She could not afford 2 weeks. She could stay and say nothing. Keep her eyes down. Do her work. Finish the baseboard, polish the good china from the second cabinet. Learn the logic of the bookshelves. Collect her timesheet on Friday. He had not recognized her. He had not even looked at her. She was, as Mrs. Hartley had said, invisible. That was what she was supposed to be. She could stay. She put her hand on her belly, just for a moment. The baby shifted, a small, interior pressing of something that wasn't yet a kick, but was already more than nothing. I know, she said quietly, to no one and to both of them. She stayed. Underscore 24. Underscore the rhythm of the house settled over her like something she wore. She learned to move through it without sound, without disruption, without drawing anything toward herself. She learned that Mr. Whitmore, Daniel, took his coffee at 7 sharp and his second cup at 9, and that both cups had to be made by Mrs. Hartley because he'd had bad experiences with agency staff and the milk-to-coffee ratio, which Mrs. Hartley relayed without irony. She learned that he was not cruel in the ways she had imagined cruelty in the years since he left. He was not a man who raised his voice. He did not speak to her, or to Doris, or to Hector in a way that was dismissive or contemptuous. He spoke to them in the way that was perhaps worse, with a clean, efficient indifference that made her understand that to him, they were functions of the household rather than presences within it. They turned lights on and off. They kept surfaces clean. They ensured that the world he moved through required nothing of him except to move through it. She was a function. She was grateful for that. Grateful that her presence registered as nothing more than a clean hallway, an emptied bin, a folded towel. Grateful that he had never looked at her the way Mrs. Hartley had on that first day. Directly, with the sense of almost recognition, because she was not sure she could keep her face as still as she needed to keep it under that kind of looking. On the second Wednesday, he was working from his study, and she was cleaning the hallway outside it with the particular quiet of someone who understood the rules when the study door opened without warning. She was on her knees again. He nearly stepped on her hand. God, he stopped. Look down. She had already started to stand, already starting to apologize, already starting to make herself smaller. I'm sorry, he said before she could. I didn't hear you. Are you all right? Fine, she said. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. I'll work further down. No, stay. He looked at her, not in the way of someone searching for something, but in the ordinary way of a man who had nearly stepped on someone and felt briefly responsible for their existence. I just need to get to the kitchen. Of course. He went. She stayed. She pressed her cloth against the baseboard and held her breath until she heard his footsteps reach the top of the stairs, and then she let it out, slowly, through her nose, the way you let things out when you've been holding them longer than one breath could count for. Underscore. It was Doris who noticed first. Doris was 61 and from Trinidad and had been working for the Whitmore household for 11 years, which gave her a kind of immunity that Clara recognized and respected. Doris noticed things because she had been in the same house long enough that anything new became visible against the familiar background of everything old. On a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks into Clara's placement, Doris appeared in the doorway of the guest bathroom where Clara was scrubbing the tile grout and said, without preamble, "How far along?" Clara sat back on her heels. There was no point in denying it. There was also no point in panic. 5.5 months. Doris made a sound that was not quite approval and not quite judgment, the sound of a woman absorbing information and deciding what to do with it. The agency doesn't know. No. You're going to tell them. When I have to. Doris was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're not showing much for 5 months. I carry small," Clara said. "I did with my son, too." Another silence. Doris looked at her with the kind of look that contained several generations of understanding things that did not need to be said. "You need anything?" The question was so simple and so unexpected that Clara had to look away for a moment, at the tile grout, at the small thing she had been trying to clean. "I'm managing." "That wasn't what I asked." Clara looked back at her. "I need the placement to hold," she said quietly. "That's the only thing." Doris nodded once. Then she said, "The missus before, she left when she was 7 months along with the second one." Nobody said anything then either. She looked at Clara steadily. "I didn't see nothing." She turned and went back down the hallway. Clara stared at the tile grout for a long moment. Then she kept scrubbing. There were things she did not let herself think about. And then there were the nights when she thought about them anyway, when Mateo was asleep on the fold-out cot, and the room was the particular dark and quiet of a space that held 2 people trying to rest, and her body was too large and too complicated for sleep to come easily. She thought about Mateo, who did not know about the baby yet, who knew only that his mother worked very hard, and that they moved sometimes, and that this was just how things were. He was a good boy, Mateo. He was the kind of child who noticed things, who noticed when she was tired and made her tea with a tea bag he left steeping too long, who noticed when the jar of coins was getting low and suggested, without accusation, that maybe they should save the quarter he'd found in the cushions of Mrs. Park's couch. He was 9 years old and already managing things. Clara thought about that sometimes, about what it meant that a 9-year-old knew how to manage things, and she pushed the thought away because there was no useful direction it led. She thought about the baby. She had not let herself think about the baby in the sustained way, the way you think about something when you're allowing yourself to plan for it. She had thought about it in the immediate and practical sense, the appointments she had managed to attend at the clinic, the supplements she was taking, the particular position that relieved the pressure in her lower back. She had not thought about it in the other sense, the sense that asked who this baby was going to be and what kind of life they were going to be born into and whether she was doing enough and whether enough even existed in the context of what she had. She had not thought about what to tell Mateo when his new sibling arrived and he asked, as he inevitably would, because Mateo was a child who asked things, who was the baby's father, and where was he? She had not thought about Daniel. She pressed her hand to her belly in the dark. She thought about Daniel now. On a Friday evening in her 5th week at the estate, she was finishing the downstairs hallway when she heard a woman's voice. She had heard women's voices before. Phone calls through doors, the businesslike tone of Mrs. Hartley on the intercom. This was different. This was a voice that belonged in the room it was speaking in. Comfortable. Proprietary. The voice of someone who had decided, at some point, that a space was theirs and had never had reason to doubt that decision. Clara moved to the end of the hallway and began working on the console table there, her back to the room. "Told you the Harrington dinner is the 15th, not the 16th, the voice was saying. "It's on the calendar." Daniel's voice, lower. "I'll check with Mrs. Hartley." "You don't need to check with Mrs. Hartley. You need to look at the calendar, which is on your phone, which is in your hand." A pause. Something that might have been the beginning of a laugh stopped before it arrived. Vivian, I'm serious, Daniel. The Harrington dinner matters. These things matter. I know. I've moved things around specifically so you don't have to think about it. All you have to do is be there. Clara kept working on the console table. She kept her cloth moving in the same small circles. She did not turn around. The woman's name was Vivian. Of course, there was a Vivian. That night, on the bus, Clara made herself think through the whole of it for the first time, in the clear, flat way you think through things when you have exhausted the emotional register and are left only with the facts. The facts were these. She was 5.5 months pregnant with the child of the man whose house she cleaned. He did not know she existed. There was a woman named Vivian who moved his calendar and his social engagements, and who spoke to him in the voice of someone who had a claim. She had $42, a jar of coins, a 9-year-old with asthma, and a placement that needed to hold through January. She needed one thing at a time. That was the rule. Just one thing at a time. The placement needed to hold. That was the one thing. Understood. Underscore. She might have managed it. She might have held all of it. The careful invisibility, the practiced quiet, the daily work of being a function rather than a presence, for the remaining weeks she needed. She was good at that kind of management. 10 years had made her very, very good at that kind of management. But on a Wednesday morning in the 6th week, the baby decided that management was not what the morning called for. Clara was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher after the breakfast service, and she straightened up too quickly, and the pain came not as the slow, building pressure she had learned to recognize and breathe through, but as something sudden and bright and wrong. And she put her hand on the counter and made a sound she had not meant to make, short, bitten off, but a sound. Mrs. Hartley was across the kitchen. She turned. She saw Clara's hand on the counter, and she saw the other hand, the one pressed to the underside of her stomach, and she crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and said, in a voice that was the least indifferent sound Clara had heard in that house since she'd arrived, "Sit down." "Right now." "I'm fine," Clara said. "You're not fine. Sit." Clara sat. Mrs. Hartley crouched in front of her, hands on Clara's knees, reading her face with the intensity of someone who had seen things and knew what they meant. How far along? It was not a question. It was an arriving at. Almost 6 months. Mrs. Hartley closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her expression had settled into something resolved. "Does the agency know?" "No." "Is there someone?" She stopped. She looked at Clara's face again, looked at it the way she had on that first day, the way that contained almost recognition. Something shifted. "Is the father—" "There's no one," Clara said. "It's just me." Mrs. Hartley held her gaze for a long moment. Then she said, "Stay there," and stood and walked toward the kitchen doorway, and Clara thought, with the flat clarity of someone watching a door close, "This is it. This is where the placement ends. This is where she calls the agency and explains, and I go back to the jar of coins and the $42 and the fold-out cot." But Mrs. Hartley did not pick up the phone. She picked up the glass on the counter and filled it with water and brought it back. "Drink that," she said. "All of it. They were going to figure out if this is Braxton Hicks or something I need to be more worried about." Clara drank the water. The pain eased. Mrs. Hartley sat in the chair across from her and said, "I had 3. All girls. The second one," she stopped, rearranged herself slightly, the way people do when they're deciding how much of themselves to offer. "The second one was difficult. I worked through it because I had to. I know what it looks like." Clara looked at her. "I'm not going to call the agency," Mrs. Hartley said. "Not today. But you're going to have to tell me things. I need to know what we're dealing with so I can work around it." "Can you do that?" Clara thought about the rules she had been operating under for 6 weeks, the careful, invisible machinery of them. Then she thought about the baby and Mateo and the $42 and Mrs. Hartley across the table with her reading glasses pushed up and her expression that was not soft, but was something. "Yes," she said. "I can do that." Mrs. Hartley nodded. She looked at the kitchen door. Then she looked back at Clara with an expression Clara couldn't fully read. "You said there's no one," she said. "The father." "That's right. And yet you're here. In this house." She paused. Is there something I should know? Clara looked at her. She looked at the glass of water in her hand. She thought about everything she'd been keeping still for 6 weeks. No, she said. Mrs. Hartley looked at her for one more moment. All right, she said. She stood and went back to the counter, and the ordinary sounds of the kitchen resumed, and Clara sat at the table with her water and her secrets and the quiet, persistent pressing of a baby who was not yet ready to be still. Underscore. She should have left then. She knew that. In the same way, after the fact, the exact moment when something became inevitable. She knew that that Wednesday morning in the kitchen was the moment she should have called the agency herself, said it wasn't working, asked to be placed elsewhere, taken the 2 weeks of uncertainty over what was coming. But she did not leave. She told herself it was practical. She told herself she needed the money, needed the stability, needed the placement to hold. All of that was true, but it was not the whole truth, and she knew it was not the whole truth. And the part that was not the whole truth was something she had not yet found words for, something that lived in the same place as the check she had never cashed and the page she had never signed and the 9-year-old boy with his father's jaw who did not know his father's name. She had a right to be here. That was the part she hadn't found words for. Not a legal right, not a claim. She had been very careful all her life since that night to make no claims that could be taken from her, but a right of another kind. The kind that comes from knowing something about a place, about a person, about a truth that no one else in the building is carrying, and understanding that your presence there is not random, is not the accident the agency Van made it look like. She had been brought here by the specific gravity of 10 years of moving away from one thing. And she was still moving, and the thing she was moving away from was in the study on the 2nd floor, checking his calendar on his phone. She was not here to confront him. She was not here to make claims. She was here because she was 5 months pregnant and $42 from nothing, and the only work the agency had this week was this house, and the gravity of 10 years had drawn her here, and she was going to do her work and collect her timesheet and take the bus home to Mateo and not make any sounds. That was the plan. That was the one thing. Understood. Underscore on a Friday morning in her 7th week. She was polishing the console table in the downstairs hallway. She had come to know this table well, the particular whorls in the wood, the way the brass drawer pull needed 2 motions to come clean, when she heard him coming down the stairs. She did not move away. There was nowhere to move. She kept her cloth moving in its circles. His footsteps slowed. She felt him stop behind her. He started. She turned. He was looking at her, not the way he had looked at her on the landing, not the efficient, indifferent look of a man who has nearly stepped on something. He was looking at her the way you look at something that is rearranging your understanding of the room you're standing in. He was looking at her the way you look at a person you once knew. She held his gaze. She had been waiting for this moment for 7 weeks, in the way you wait for something you cannot prevent, and she was not going to flinch from it now that it had come. Clara, he said. Just that. Her name. Said the way you say a word when you have not said it in a very long time, and are surprised to find it still in your mouth. Mr. Whitmore, she said. The silence between them was the loudest thing in the house. His eyes moved from her face to the rest of her, not in the way of a man assessing a woman, but in the way of a man who has just understood something, whose eyes are moving because his mind is catching up to what they're showing him. They stopped at the curve of her stomach, visible even through the loose uniform shirt, unmistakable at 6 months to anyone looking with intention rather than indifference. His face changed. She watched it change. She kept her cloth in her hand. She kept her feet where they were. She kept her eyes steady on his face, and she thought, with the flat clarity that had gotten her through 10 years of impossible things, one thing at a time. Just one thing at a time. If this story has found its way to you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Mama Told Me. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, and more of them coming your way. The silence lasted long enough that she could hear the fountain outside through the front windows. Then Daniel Whitmore said, "Come into the study." It was not a request, but it was not the voice of a man accustomed to cruelty either. It was the voice of a man who needed four walls around this conversation before it became something he could not control. Clara set her cloth on the console table. She followed him. The study was the room she knew least well. She had never been asked to clean it. Mrs. Hartley handled it herself, which Clara had understood without being told was a matter of protocol rather than trust. The bookshelves lined three walls, floor to ceiling, the particular logic of their arrangement still opaque to her. There was a desk the size of a dining table, a leather chair behind it, two smaller chairs in front, a window that looked out over the garden. He did not sit behind the desk. He stood at the window with his back to her for a moment, and she stood near the door, and she was aware of the particular quality of the room, the kind of quiet that expensive things create, the quiet of surfaces that absorb sound rather than reflect it. He turned. "How long have you been here?" he said. 7 weeks. He absorbed that. She watched him absorb it, the slight movement in his jaw, the way his eyes went somewhere interior for a moment before coming back. "You knew, before you came." "I didn't choose the placement," she said. "The agency sends you where they send you. But when you arrived, you knew." "Yes." Another silence. He looked at her stomach, then back at her face. "Is this—" he stopped. He was not a man who left sentences unfinished. She could see him trying to find the end of it. "Is this mine?" The question landed in the room, and she felt it land, felt the particular weight of it. The word mine, with everything it claimed and everything it refused to claim simultaneously. "No," she said. "This one isn't yours." His face shifted. Something released in it. Relief, or the beginning of relief. And then she watched that release stop, watched him register what she had said, the specific grammar of it. "This one." He looked at her. "Clara, I had your child," she said. Her voice was even. She had been preparing for this sentence for 7 weeks, possibly for 10 years. 10 years ago, I had him, and I raised him alone. His name is Mateo. He's 9 years old. He has your jaw and my eyes, and he's never had a father. The fountain outside, the expensive quiet of the room. Daniel Whitmore stood at his window and looked at her with the expression of a man who has just understood the full dimensions of something he thought he had closed the door on a decade ago. "I sent," he started. $10,000, she said, "in a paper I never signed." He looked at the floor. "I'm not here for that," she said. "I want you to understand that. I'm not here to make claims. I'm not here because I planned this. I'm here because I needed work, and this is where the agency sent me. And I need the placement to hold through January because I have a son with asthma and an inhaler that costs $87, and I have $42 in my checking account." She paused. "I'm telling you now because you recognized me, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. But I am not here for anything from you." He raised his eyes. "You have a son," he said. "I have a son," she said. "You have nothing to do with that. You made that choice." Underscore. She went back to the hallway. She picked up her cloth. She finished the console table. Her hands were steady. She noted this with something that was not pride exactly, but was adjacent to it. The particular, durable steadiness that comes from having survived something before and knowing you can survive it again. Mrs. Hartley appeared at the end of the hallway at noon with a sandwich and a glass of juice and set them on the console table without a word. Clara ate the sandwich standing up. She drank the juice. She kept working. Daniel did not come out of his study. Underscore that evening, she sat with Mateo at the small table in their room at Mrs. Park's house. The fold-out cot pushed against the wall to make room, and she helped him with his math homework. He was doing fractions. He was very good at fractions, which she had always thought was a specific kind of intelligence, the ability to see a whole thing and understand it as parts simultaneously, and she watched him work through a problem with a pencil that needed sharpening and thought about what she was going to say to him. About the baby, about work, about his father, whose name she had not yet said to him, whose face she had not yet described, whose house she had been cleaning for 7 weeks. Not tonight. Not yet. She sharpened his pencil with the little handheld sharpener they kept in the pencil cup and handed it back and said, "You've got 2 more, and then it's time." "Mom, 2 more." He did the 2 more. He was good about that. He grumbled, and then he did the thing. She had always been grateful for that. When he was asleep, she sat at the table in the dark with her hand on her belly and thought about what came next. She did not have a plan that extended past January. She had never had a plan that extended past the next necessary thing. That was not failure. It was a specific kind of navigation that the life she had been living required. You could not plan to the horizon when the ground under your feet was shifting. You planned to the next solid thing, and then you planned from there. The next solid thing was the placement. The placement she understood now had changed shape. Underscore. Daniel called the agency on Saturday morning. Clara didn't know this until Monday, when Mrs. Hartley called her into the kitchen before she'd taken off her coat and said, with an expression that was carefully arranged into neutrality, "Mr. Whitmore has asked the agency to convert your placement to a direct hire. He's offered you a full-time position with benefits. The salary he's proposed is—" She named a number that Clara heard, and then heard again because the first time it moved through her it didn't settle. Clara sat down. "He didn't discuss this with me," she said. "No," Mrs. Hartley said. "He discussed it with me. He asked me to present it to you and to make clear that there is no obligation, that your current arrangement continues whether you accept or not." Clara looked at the table, the same table she had sat at 6 weeks ago when the pain came and Mrs. Hartley had brought her water. "Why?" "He didn't say." "What did he say?" Mrs. Hartley was quiet for a moment. "He said she deserves something stable." The kitchen was very still. "I need to think about it," Clara said. "Of course," Mrs. Hartley said. Understood. She thought about it on the bus. She thought about it at the clinic on Tuesday, where they listened to the baby's heartbeat and told her everything was progressing normally, and she lay on the paper-covered table with the gel cold on her stomach and the small, rapid drum of a heartbeat filling the room. And she thought, what does he want? Because men like Daniel Whitmore did not do things without wanting something. She had known him when he was 28 and she was 24, and she had believed with everything in her that he was different from the version of himself his family had constructed, more open, more real, more capable of choosing something outside the lines they had drawn for him. She had been wrong about that. She had been very specifically, very thoroughly wrong about that. And yet, she thought about the expression on his face in the study. Not the relief she had watched for him and then stop. The thing after it. When she had said Mateo and 9 years old in your jaw. The expression that was not guilt and not grief and not the performance of either one of those things. She didn't have a word for it. She lay on the table and listened to the heartbeat and did not have a word for it. Understood. On Wednesday. She came to work and went about the day. Daniel's door was closed. She worked around it, which was what she was supposed to do. At 2 in the afternoon, she was carrying a basket of cleaned linens toward the guest room at the end of the hall when the study door opened. Clara! She stopped. She did not turn immediately. She gave herself the half-second that the situation required, the half-second in which she reminded herself of the rules. One thing at a time. Just the one thing. Then she turned. He was standing in the doorway. He looked like a man who had not slept very much in the past several days. She recognized that look. She had worn it herself many times for many reasons. "I want to meet him," he said. She held the linen basket. "Mateo," he said. He stopped. He tried again. "I don't know what I'm asking for. I know I don't have a right to ask for anything. But I would like to meet him, if that's something you would consider." "Why?" she said. "Because he's my son." "He's my son," she said. "He's mine. You gave up the other part. I know that." He held her gaze. "I'm not trying to take anything. I'm not trying to claim anything. I'm asking if you would consider letting me." His voice shifted, not breaking, but moving close to some edge of itself. "I'm asking if I could know him." She stood in the hallway with the linen basket and looked at this man who had given her a check and a form and 10 years of a loan, and she thought about Mateo at the table doing fractions, the sharpened pencil, the grumbling, and then the doing of the thing. She thought about the jar of coins. She thought about the inhaler. She thought about what Mateo deserved. Not what Daniel deserved. Not what she deserved. What Mateo deserved. "I need time," she said. "Of course. And I need you to understand something. What I decide has nothing to do with the job offer. Those are separate. If I say yes to meeting him, it's because I decide it's right for him. Not because you offer me something. Not because I owe you anything. Not because of any of this." She gestured briefly at the house around them. "Do you understand that?" "Yes," he said. "Do you actually understand it?" He looked at her. "Yes," he said again, and this time it landed differently. She picked up the linen basket. "I'll let you know. Underscore. She took the job. She told herself, on the bus home that evening, that she took it because the money was real and the benefits were real and the stability was real and that those things mattered more than the complicated geography of the situation. She told herself that she was capable of separating the practical from the personal, that she had been doing exactly that for 7 weeks in this house and could continue doing it. She also told herself that she was not doing this because some part of her, some deep and stubborn part that 10 years of survival had not managed to root out entirely, wanted to see what he would do. Not because she expected anything. Not because she was leaving a door open that she had firmly shut. Just to see. She was allowed that much. She thought she was allowed that much. Underscore. The weeks that followed had a different quality than the weeks before. Not because anything between them had resolved. Nothing had resolved. But the shape of the thing had changed from something hidden to something known, which was its own kind of weight, but a different kind, one she could carry differently. Daniel was careful. She noted this. He was very careful. He did not seek her out. He did not create reasons to speak with her. When they passed in the hallway, he nodded, and she nodded, and they continued. He did not make the situation smaller than it was by pretending it was ordinary, and he did not make it larger by treating it with the grave, meaningful attention of a man performing accountability. He was just careful. She found, against her own better understanding of herself, that she was paying attention to this. One afternoon, she came around the corner of the kitchen and found him standing at the counter, holding a cup of coffee and reading something on his phone. And for a moment, before he heard her and looked up, she saw in the way you see someone when they don't know they're being looked at. And the thing she saw was a man who was tired. Not the performed fatigue of a busy person, but something older and more interior, the kind of tired that accumulates over years of arranging your life around a particular image of yourself and finding, eventually, that the image is exhausting to maintain. He looked up. "Sorry," she said, and moved toward the pantry. "Clara." She stopped, not because of the word, but because of the way it was said, without strategy, without management. Just her name. "The offer I made. The job. I want you to know that it wasn't," he paused. He set the cup down. "I know how it looked. I know it could look like I was trying to buy something. I know what it looked like," she said. "I'm telling you it wasn't that." She turned to face him. Then what was it? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, he didn't look away. It was the only thing I could think to do. That was within my right to do. A pause. I'm aware that's not enough. I'm aware of what I took from you when I left. I'm aware that $10,000 in a form I'm ashamed it was not. He stopped again. I'm telling you that the offer was an attempt to do something, not to fix it. I'm not deluded enough to think it fixes anything. She looked at him for a long time. Mateo's birthday is in March, she said. He'll be 10. He's never asked about his father directly. He's asked around it, the way children do when they're trying to figure out whether the question is allowed. She paused. I want you to understand what you would be walking into. It's not a situation where you arrive, and it's easy and everyone adjusts. I know. He's a person, she said. He's a full, complete, complicated person who has gotten himself to 9 years old without you, and he's fine. He is doing fine. What I decide about whether you meet him has nothing to do with what you can offer him financially. I need you to hear that. I hear it. He doesn't need rescuing. He needs, she stopped. She tried to find the word. He needs honesty. He needs someone who will be consistent. He doesn't need grand gestures. All right, I'm not making a decision today, she said. I'm telling you what it would require. So you know what you're agreeing to before you agree to it. Daniel Whitmore nodded. He picked up his coffee cup. He looked at it for a moment rather than at her, and she thought she saw something in his face that she still didn't have a word for. Not guilt, not grief, not the performance of either. Something that looked like the beginning of understanding what it means to be accountable to something you cannot fix. The person who changed everything was not Daniel. It was Vivian. Clara had not encountered her directly since that first overheard conversation, had been aware of her presence in the house on occasional evenings and weekends as a sound pattern. Heels on marble, a particular laugh, the proprietary ease of her voice, but had managed the careful geometry of invisibility well enough that they had not been in the same room. On a Saturday afternoon in early December, that changed. Clara was descending the main staircase with a bundle of towels when Vivian came through the front door with a paper shopping bag in each hand and the energy of a woman who moved through spaces as though they had been arranged specifically to accommodate her passage. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at Clara. "You're new," she said. Not unkindly, but with the assessing quality of someone taking inventory. "Clara Mendez," Clara said. "I started about 2 months ago." Vivian tilted her head. She was looking at Clara the way Clara had noticed people sometimes look at her, with this slightly unfocused quality of someone searching for a context. "Have we met?" "I don't think so," Clara said. She let go. "Where's Mrs. Hartley?" "I believe she's in the kitchen." Vivian moved past her with her bags. Then she stopped. She turned back. She was looking at Clara's stomach. Her expression changed slowly. The way expressions change when a piece of information is arriving that needs to be reconciled with other pieces of information already present. Clara watched this process happen and felt, with the patient certainty of someone who had seen what was coming for a while, that the moment she had been navigating around had arrived. "You're pregnant," Vivian said. "Yes," Clara said. Vivian's eyes came back up to her face. She was a beautiful woman, sharp and controlled. The kind of beauty that was partly natural and partly the product of sustained effort and resources. Her expression was not angry. It was something more complicated than angry. The expression of a person assembling a picture they have not wanted to assemble. "How far along?" she said. 6.5 months. Vivian was very still. "And you're working here?" "Yes." "Who is?" She stopped herself. She set the bags down. She looked at Clara for a long moment. "Does Daniel know you're here?" "Yes," Clara said. The word landed. Vivian absorbed it. She looked at the bags on the floor, and then at the towels in Clara's arms, and then back at Clara's face, and something in her expression shifted into a precision that Clara recognized as the particular precision of a woman who is putting something together that she would have preferred not to know. "I see," she said. Then she picked up her bags and walked toward the kitchen. Underscore. The argument. If it was an argument, it was the kind that didn't raise its voice, which made it harder to track from the hallway, where Clara continued with the towels, moving slowly, not lingering, not listening but aware, lasted approximately 20 minutes. She heard the word unacceptable. She heard the word unbelievable. She heard Daniel's voice, lower, steadier, the particular steadiness she had noticed in him that was not coldness, but was the practiced management of a situation he had decided he was not going to lose control of. She heard Vivian say, very clearly, "You didn't tell me." And Daniel say, "No, I didn't." And Vivian say, "Why?" And the answer, when it came, was too low for Clara to hear. She carried the towels to the guest room. She folded them into the cabinet with the precision Mrs. Hartley had shown her, edges aligned, stacked with the folded side facing out. She closed the cabinet. She stood in the guest room for a moment with her hand on the cool wood of the cabinet door. She had not come here to do this. She needed to keep saying that to herself because the risk of a situation like this was that you started to feel responsible for it, for the fracture lines that appeared in other people's arrangements when the truth arrived in the middle of them. She had not arranged any of this. She was a woman who had come here because the agency sent her, because she needed the work, because she had Mateo and the inhaler and the jar of coins. She had not come to disrupt anything. And yet, she put on her coat. She went down the back stairs. She let herself out through the kitchen door, which she was entitled to do because it was the end of her shift. She walked to the bus stop. She waited in the November cold for the 4:47, and when it came, she got on and found a seat, and she rode home to Elmhurst and to Mateo, who was at Mrs. Park's kitchen table when she arrived, eating a bowl of cereal for dinner because it was Saturday, and on Saturdays they were allowed cereal for dinner. And he looked up and said, "Mom, can we get the kind with the marshmallows next time?" And she said, "We'll see." And she took off her coat and sat across from him and watched him eat his cereal and thought about what she was going to tell him. She told him on a Sunday evening, 2 weeks before Christmas. She had thought carefully about how. She had thought about it the way she thought about everything, in practical increments, planning to the next solid thing, not to the horizon. What she knew was that she was not going to lie to him, and she was not going to soften it into something unrecognizable, and she was not going to treat him as younger than he was. She sat across from him at the small table. She folded her hands. She said, "There's something I've been meaning to tell you for a while. About your father." Mateo looked at her. He set down his pencil. He said nothing, which was what he did when something important was being said. She told him everything that was his to know. Not everything. There were things that were hers and things that were his, and she was careful with the boundary between them. She told him that his father was someone she had known when she was young. She told him that his father did not know about him at first, and that when she had tried to tell him, he had been afraid, and he had made a choice she did not agree with and had always thought was wrong. She told him that she had been angry about that for a long time, and that she had raised Mateo on her own because she was capable of that, and because he deserved to be raised by someone who chose to be there. She told him that his father was someone she had recently come into contact with again. She did not say how, and that his father had asked to meet him. Mateo listened to all of this without speaking. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want him to meet me?" She looked at her son, at the jaw she had been looking at for 9 years. "I want you to have whatever you decide you want," she said. "This is your choice as much as mine. More even. But what do you want?" She thought about this. She thought about it honestly, the way she had been trying to think about things honestly since she sat down with Mateo and committed to not lying to him. "I want you to be okay," she said. "However you end up. I want you to know that I have done everything I could do to make sure you're okay. And I want you to know that your father made a bad choice when you were not yet here to matter to him, and that I believe, I don't know this for certain, but I believe that now you are here, and he knows you are here, he understands what he chose to walk away from." Mateo looked at the table. He picked up his pencil and turned it end over end in his fingers, the way he did when he was thinking. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. I'll meet him. He looked up. But you have to be there. I will be, she said. He nodded. He picked up his pencil and looked back at his homework. Then he said, very quietly, without looking at her, Mom. Yes. You're really good at being the one person. She looked at the top of his head, at the dark, curly hair, at the particular way he held a pencil. She pressed her lips together. You too, she said. Underscore. Mrs. Hartley called her on a Monday. Vivian has ended things, she said, without preamble. I'm telling you because I thought you should know, and because Mr. Whitmore asked me to tell you, and because I think you should decide what to do with that information before you come in tomorrow. Clara sat on the edge of the fold-out cot in the dark room. Mateo was asleep. The baby was pressing, gently and insistently, against the inside of her. Is he all right? She said. A pause. He'll be fine, Mrs. Hartley said. He asked about you. He wanted to know if you were all right. Tell him I'm fine. I'll tell him. And tell him, she stopped. She looked across the dark room at her sleeping son. Tell him Mateo said yes. She had thought, in the days before the meeting, that she would feel something dramatic. Fear, perhaps, or the particular grief of something ending, or the specific vertigo of a life rearranging itself around a new fact. She had prepared herself for drama the way you prepare for weather. Not because you can stop it, but because you want to be dressed appropriately when it arrives. What she felt on the Saturday morning she brought Mateo to the estate was something quieter than drama. She felt the way you feel when you've been carrying something for a very long time and you have finally set it down. Not relief exactly, because the thing is still there, still present, still requiring attention, but a different relationship to the weight of it. Mateo was quiet in the taxi. He was wearing his good jacket, navy blue, slightly too short in the sleeves, because she had bought it last winter and he had grown, and he was looking out the window with the serious, interior expression he wore when he was working something through. She did not fill the silence. She had learned, with Mateo, that the silence usually did better work than anything she could put into it. When the taxi pulled up to the iron gates, he looked at them for a moment. It's big, he said. Yes, she said. Do you work here? Yes. He looked at her. You clean it. Most of it. He turned back to the gates. Something moved across his face. Not judgment, but a kind of recalibration, the way children recalibrate when the world turns out to be more complicated than they understood it to be. Then he opened the taxi door and got out, and she paid the driver and followed him. Underscore. Daniel was waiting in the front room, not the study. This was the room with the tall windows and the good chairs, and the painting on the wall that was art rather than decoration, and Clara had chosen it deliberately when Mrs. Hartley asked where she'd like to meet, because it was neutral in a way the study was not. It was not his room, not her working space. It was a room that belonged to neither of them, which made it the right room for something that was going to require both of them to be outside their usual positions. He stood when they came in. He was wearing clothes she had not seen him in before. Not the suit he wore to meetings, not the weekend casualness of a man in his own home. Something in between, the clothes of a person who had thought about what to wear and arrived at something that said he had taken the occasion seriously without having taken himself too seriously. She noted this, the thought behind it, and filed it somewhere. Mateo stood beside her. He was not hiding behind her. He was not the kind of child who hid, but he was close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Daniel looked at her son. She watched his face. She had prepared herself for what she thought she might see. The guilt, the performance of recognition, the managed emotion of a man who understood what was required of him in this moment. She had prepared herself to be critical of whatever she saw, because she had earned the right to be critical, and she was not going to suspend that right on the basis of a single Saturday morning. What she saw was not any of those things. What she saw was a man looking at a child and understanding, for the first time in a way you can only understand something when it is standing 3 feet in front of you, exactly what he had walked away from. His eyes moved over Mateo, the way you look at something that rearranges your sense of the possible. The jaw, the eyes, the particular way Mateo held himself, straight-backed, watchful, with the specific composure of a child who had been through enough to know that composure mattered. Daniel's face, for a moment, was completely unmanaged. She had never seen that before, not even in the years when she had known him, when she had believed in him, when she had built an entire future around her understanding of who he was. In all of that time, she had never seen his face without its management. She saw it now, and she filed that away too. Underscore. Mateo, she said quietly. This is Daniel Whitmore. Mateo looked at him. Direct, steady. Hi, Daniel said. His voice was careful, but not performed. I'm glad you came. Mateo considered this. My mom said you wanted to meet me. I did. I do. Why? The word landed with the clean, unbothered weight of a child who has not yet learned to soften the honest question. Daniel received it. He did not flinch from it. He looked at Mateo for a moment, and Clara understood that he was deciding how to answer it honestly rather than how to answer it correctly, which were two different things, and that the distinction was the right one to be working with. Because I made a mistake a long time ago, he said, and I've been aware of that mistake for a long time. And now I have the chance to at least try to be something better than the mistake. If you're willing to let me try. Mateo listened to this. He turned the answer over. Did you make the mistake because you were scared? A pause. Yes, Daniel said. My mom says most bad choices come from fear. She's right. Mateo looked at Clara. She gave him nothing. This was his conversation, his to navigate. He looked back at Daniel. Okay, he said. Then, with the specific practicality of a 9-year-old who has decided to move forward. Do you have anything to drink? I'm thirsty from the taxi. Something crossed Daniel's face that she had never expected to see there. Something that was so close to surprised, helpless, undone joy that she had to look away for a moment at the painting on the wall, at the light through the tall windows. I'll get you something, he said. What do you like? Apple juice if you have it. Or water is fine. I'll find apple juice, Daniel said. He left the room to find apple juice for a 9-year-old boy with his jaw and her eyes, and Clara stood in the front room of the Whitmore estate and pressed her hand to her belly, where the baby moved in its small, insistent way. And she thought, one thing at a time. Just one thing at a time. And look, here's the next thing. Underscore. They stayed for 2 hours. Mateo and Daniel sat on the good chairs, and Mateo asked questions with the straightforward curiosity of a child who had decided that this situation was interesting and that interesting situations deserved investigation. He asked what Daniel did for work. He asked how old the house was. He asked whether Daniel had any pets. He didn't, and whether he'd ever wanted any. He said he'd had a dog once when he was about Mateo's age, a beagle named Copernicus, and Mateo's face opened slightly at this, at the specificity of it. The Copernicus of it, the way a real detail does more work than 100 careful generalities. Clara sat nearby and let it happen. She did not orchestrate. She did not smooth or redirect or manage. She watched her son navigate something unprecedented with a particular grace that was entirely his own. Not fearless, because he was not a fearless child. He was a child who felt things deeply and quietly and processed them with great seriousness. But present, engaged, giving the situation the full weight of his attention. At one point, Dana caught her eye. She held his gaze for a moment. Neither of them said anything. She looked back at Mateo, who was explaining the rules of a card game he'd learned at school, and she thought about what Mrs. Hartley had said on the phone. He asked if you were all right. She thought about the study and the hallway, and the console table she had polished for 7 weeks. She thought about the check she had never cashed, and the form she had never signed, and the 10 years in between. She thought about Vivian, who had ended things, and about what Daniel had said, or hadn't said loudly enough for her to hear, when Vivian asked him why he hadn't told her. She thought about all of this, and she was careful with it, the way you are careful with things that are still forming, that are not yet solid enough to hold a decision. Underscore. When they were leaving, Mateo shook Daniel's hand. The gesture was so serious, so formally 9 years old, that Clara felt something catch in her throat. Daniel accepted the handshake with equal seriousness, which was exactly right. "Can I come again?" Mateo said. Daniel looked at Clara. "That's up to your mom," he said, which was also exactly right. Mateo looked at her. She looked at her son, at the navy jacket, too short in the sleeves, at the jaw, at the serious, waiting expression. She thought about what he deserved. She thought about honesty and consistency and the absence of grand gestures. She thought about a man who had come down the stairs and found her in a hallway and said her name in a voice that had not said it in 10 years and had not looked away. "We'll see," she said. Mateo nodded. He understood "we'll see" as a different word from no. He had always been good at that. Underscore. The baby came on a Friday in February, 3 weeks early. Not dangerously early. Early enough to require a longer stay at the hospital, early enough to give Clara a week of managed panic before things stabilized, but not early in the way that makes doctors' faces go careful. The baby was a girl. She had Clara's nose and a set of lungs that announced themselves immediately and without reservation. Clara named her Rosa. Mateo met his sister through the glass of the nursery window and stood with his hands pressed flat against it, looking at her with the expression of someone who has just understood that the world has gained something it was missing before. He was there with Mrs. Park, who had driven them to the hospital, who had been unexpectedly kind about the whole thing in the way that people sometimes are when you finally let them see what you are actually carrying. Dana was not there. She had not told him she was in labor. She had not decided yet what she was telling him, what she was offering him, what she was willing to build, and at what pace and in what shape. She was still one thing at a time, still planning to the next solid thing rather than to the horizon. And this room, this baby, this window where Mateo was pressing his hands, was the solid thing she was on. He called the next morning. Mrs. Hartley had told him. Clara had expected this and had not tried to prevent it, because Mrs. Hartley was a woman who made her own decisions about what information mattered, and Clara respected that. She answered. "How are you?" he said. No preamble. "Tired," she said honestly. "She's here. She's well. We're both well." "Good." A pause. "I'm glad." She listened to the pause. "Daniel." "Yes. I need you to understand something about how this works. What I'm going to offer you, going forward, is not a second chance in the sense of erasing what happened. It doesn't erase. It can't." She shifted in the hospital bed, carefully. "What it is a start. Something that begins from where we actually are, not from where we would have been if you had made a different choice 10 years ago. There is no version of this that pretends the 10 years didn't happen." "I know that," he said. "And it's slow," she said. "Whatever this is, it's slow and it's on my terms and Mateo's terms. And the minute it stops being that, it stops." "I understand." "Do you?" "I'm learning," he said, which was different and more honest than yes. She looked at the ceiling of the hospital room. She thought about Rosa through the nursery glass, and Mateo with his hands pressed flat against it, and the gravity of 10 years that had delivered her to a house she had not chosen, to a hallway she had polished, to a man who had found her name still in his mouth after all that time. "Come on Sunday," she said. "Mateo will want to show you the baby. He's very proud." She could hear something in his voice when he said Sunday that she did not try to name. She let it be what it was. Spring came in a way springs come after hard winters. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the slow accumulation of small changes that you don't notice individually and then notice all at once. A morning that doesn't require a coat. The particular quality of light at 4 in the afternoon. The way Mateo started leaving his jacket at home and then coming home shivering and not admitting he was cold. Clara had moved by April into a 2-bedroom apartment in a building 12 minutes from Mrs. Park's house, which meant Mateo could still walk to school the same way and see the same people, which mattered because stability, she had always believed, was built out of small things that stay the same even while the large things change. The new apartment was possible because of the job at the Whitmore estate, which she had kept, which she had decided to keep not because of Daniel and not despite Daniel, but as a separate matter, because she was good at the work and Mrs. Hartley had become someone she trusted and the money was real and the benefits were real, and she had a daughter now who needed the same things Mateo needed. Daniel was careful. She kept noting this, kept filing it away in the place where she kept the things that were still forming, still not solid enough to hold a decision. He was careful in the way of a man who understood that he had a very narrow margin of trust to work within and that every action either widened or narrowed that margin, and that widening it required a quality of attention that could not be performed, only actually paid. He came on Sundays. Not every Sunday. She had not asked for every Sunday, and he had not offered it as a standing arrangement, because standing arrangements carry an expectation that she was not ready to extend. But most Sundays, he would arrive at the apartment with no agenda announced in advance, which she had asked for and which he delivered. He would sit with Mateo. He would hold Rosa when Mateo asked him to, holding her with the slightly uncertain care of a man who had not held many babies, learning the way you learn something when the consequence of not learning it matters to you. Mateo, for his part, had decided to approach his father with the same methodical curiosity he applied to everything. He asked him things. He tested him, not cruelly, but honestly, in the way children test the structural integrity of something they are considering trusting their weight to. He told Daniel about the card game, and Daniel learned it. He told Daniel about fractions, and Daniel said he'd always been good at math, and Mateo said, without irony, "Me too, probably from you," and the simplicity of it, the easy biological acceptance of it, cost Clara something she had not expected it to cost. Not a bad cost, just a cost. The acknowledgement that things had been lost that could not be recovered, and that the only honest response to that was to be present for what was still possible. Underscore on a Sunday in May. She came out of the kitchen to find Daniel sitting on the floor of the living room with Rosa on his lap. Rosa was 3 months old and had recently discovered that she had opinions about everything, including whether she was being held correctly, and she was applying those opinions loudly and without reservation to everyone who held her except Clara and Mateo. She was not applying them to Daniel. She was looking up at him with the searching, wide-eyed focus of a baby who has not yet learned to be cautious, who receives every face that presents itself to her as a new and interesting piece of the world, and she had one fist wrapped around Daniel's thumb with the specific, iron grip of a child who has decided that what she has is hers. Daniel was looking down at her. His face was the unmanaged face, the one she had first seen the morning Mateo walked through the door. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway and watched this for a moment. Just a moment. Long enough to understand something she had been approaching from a distance for a long time. He was not the same man who had handed her a check and left. That man had existed, had made real choices that had real consequences that she was still living inside of, and she was not going to pretend otherwise, was never going to pretend otherwise. But he was also not only that man. He was a man who was trying, not performing trying, not the managed strategic trying of someone executing a plan, but actually haltingly, imperfectly trying in the way that is the only kind of trying that means anything. She had not forgiven him. She was not sure forgiveness was the right word for what she was working toward, was not sure it was a word that mapped onto the particular geography of what had happened between them. What she was working toward was something more like the willingness to build something from where they actually were. Not from the past, not from the imagined future, from the actual present, with all its complications and its costs. With Mateo on the floor doing homework and Rose on a lap she had not expected to ever share, in a Sunday in May that smelled like the window she had left open in the kitchen. That was what she could offer. That was what she was willing to try. She went back into the kitchen and finished making the tea. She made 3 cups, one for her, one for Daniel, which she had started doing in the past month without making a declaration of it, because declarations felt like more than she was ready to offer, and cups of tea felt like exactly enough. Mateo didn't drink tea, but she poured him juice, which she put on the low table where he could reach it without interrupting whatever he was in the middle of. She carried the tray out. Daniel looked up. Rosa, irritated by the movement, made a sound of protest and tightened her grip on his thumb. He looked back down at her with the expression of a man who has been claimed by something he did not anticipate and does not know what to do about except to let it be true. "Tea," Clara said. "Thank you," he said. She sat in the chair across from him. She poured her cup. She looked at her daughter and at the man holding her daughter and at her son on the floor with his homework, pencil moving, one leg folded under him. She thought about the agency van, the cobblestone driveway, the iron gates, the way she had kept her eyes down and noted the fountain without letting herself feel anything about it. She had been brought here by gravity, by the specific weight of 10 years of moving away from something that turned out to be moving, without her consent, back toward her. She had not planned this. She would not have chosen it if you had asked her before the van pulled up to those gates, if you had described to her what she would find inside. But here was what she knew about things you don't choose. They're sometimes the things that ask more of you than the things you do choose. They ask you to be more honest, more present, more willing to stand in the actual moment you are in rather than the one you wished you were in. She had spent 10 years being extraordinarily good at standing in the actual moment, at one thing at a time, at planning to the next solid thing. The next solid thing was this: a Sunday in May, a cup of tea, a daughter who had decided to trust the face looking down at her, a son who had decided to give something a chance, and a woman who was slowly, one careful thing at a time, learning to do the same. There's a photograph on the windowsill of Clara's apartment. It was taken by Mateo, who had asked to use her phone and who had the instinct, it turned out, for the unrepeatable ordinary moment. In it, Daniel is still on the floor, Rosa still gripping his thumb, and Clara is sitting in the chair across from him, and she's looking not at the camera but at her daughter with an expression that takes a moment to name. It is the expression of a woman who knows exactly what she went through to arrive at this moment, who is not pretending it was simple or that it cost nothing, or that the accounting of it is anywhere close to settled, and who is, nonetheless, present. Here, in this room, in this light with these people. The expression of someone who has set something down. Not let go of it. You don't let go of 10 years. But set it down in the specific way that means you are choosing to have your hands free for whatever comes next. Mateo titled the photo because Mateo named everything in the caption he put on the copy he printed out and taped to his bedroom wall. Us. May. 2 words. Enough. Underscore. Mama used to say that the things that find you when you are not looking for them have a different quality than the things you search for. She said that the searching exhausts you in a particular way. You come to the thing already spent, already depleted from the effort of finding it, and sometimes you can't feel it properly because you have nothing left. But the things that arrive when you have your hands full, when you're just trying to get through the week, when you're on your knees with a cloth and a baseboard of $42 in your checking account, those things find you whole. They find you exactly as you are. She said kindness was like that too. It rarely announces itself. It rarely arrives in a shape you expect. It arrives in the form of a woman who brings you water and doesn't call the agency. It arrives in the form of a man who looks at a child and understands, in a way he could not have understood from a distance, exactly what he chose to leave behind. It arrives in the form of a 9-year-old who says you're really good at being the one person in the dark. It means it is the highest thing he knows to say. And Mama always said this too. The hardest kindness is the kind you extend towards someone who does not yet deserve it. Not because they have earned it, not because the debt is settled, but because you have decided, with your full self, with your eyes open, with your hands free, that building something from where you are is worth more than standing in the rubble of what happened and refusing to build. That is not forgiveness. That is not the erasure of anything. That is just the decision to keep going. Clara Mendez made that decision every day. Not once, not dramatically, not with a single moment of transformation. Every day, in the ordinary increments of a life that was still hard and still complicated and still one thing at a time. She made it when she poured a cup of tea for someone she was not ready to trust and put it on the table without declaration. She made it when she told her son the truth. She made it when she answered the phone and said, "Come on Sunday." She made it on the bus, going home, every time. That is the kind of courage that doesn't get named. The kind that doesn't arrive with music or with a moment of recognition or with an audience to witness it. It arrives in the form of a woman getting on a bus after a long day, her bag over one shoulder, her hand resting quietly over the life she is carrying, going home to the next solid thing. Mama said that kind of courage was the realest kind. I believe she was right. Underscore. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. Mama always said, the people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, I think you'll find the other videos on your screen are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. There's always a story waiting at Mama Told Me.